So we've had a lot of really great talks about grad, MS, MBA. I feel like we're leaving the undergrads to roast. And so we're going to focus a little bit on the undergrads as well. At least at Smith from the University of Maryland, right now we have about 3,000 grad students or undergrad students in our school. We're looking to raise that to about 4,000 grad, I keep saying grad, you gotta have that in my head now. About 4,000 undergrad students over the next 5 or so years as part of our plan. So one of the courses that I teach, or one of the many courses that I teach, is this information systems capstone. It's an undergraduate capstone for our IS students, and I just started teaching it this semester. We've been teaching it for a while, and I thought I want to see what can I do to maybe make some changes and make it a little bit more industry relevant as well. So just a little bit about me, education. I come from industry, so I have a lot of IT industry experience, and I thought this is great. But academia is way more fun. So I ended up going for a PhD and then saying, hey, how can I really get into academia? So when I do all of my teaching, I try to focus on what have I done in industry and how does it apply to academia? Because I said so is not usually a very good response that you can give to a student. The better response is, I'm doing this because, ... this is how it goes in industry, or this is what my experience has been in industry. I always tell my students, I feel not very smart, but I'm good at Google. I haven't yet changed that to ChatGPT. I maybe will at some point as well. But for a class like this, ChatGPT may be very difficult to do a certain number of aspects of it. So I taught a bunch of courses. One of my favorite types of courses as of lately to teach is experiential learning. I'm going to throw out that buzzword there, and I'll just quantify it in saying that for me, experiential learning means we're dealing with some kind of external component, a client of some kind. So part of my pedagogical approach essentially is how I run this course. Most importantly, learning should lead to success out there, and most learning happens outside the classroom. I would love to think I'm really engaging, I'm the sage on the stage. Really, that's not the case at all. Someday, I hope. And I really, really hate PowerPoint, which seems ironic because I'm giving you a PowerPoint that I've not designed very well, because I really hate PowerPoint. So about the course specifically, it's called Information Systems Projects, and it is a capstone course. It's a required course for our undergraduate senior students, IS. A lot of our students double major because we make it very, very easy as well. So we will often get students who are finance majors and say, I really want to be in tech. I've heard of ChatGPT, I should go do tech as well. So they add on an IS major, or marketing, or management, or accounting. So again, we do get a lot of double majors doing that. The goal of this course is that it's a team-based course where they work in teams, and they're going to end up implementing a real-world project for a business of some kind. While doing that, as you can imagine, they've never really done it before outside of the controlled environment of academia. If you think of Introduction to Programming, or Systems Analysis and Design, or a database course, they're not generally working with clients and seeing everything they thought they learned is not exactly how it's going to happen once they get to the, quote, real world. So this course basically throws them in the deep end and forces them to behave more similarly to as they would if they were actually working in the real world. So we do have a fair number of prerequisites because we do want to make sure that they are prepared for this kind of course. They do need a coding course, so that's going to be our Python course. But more specifically, we teach problem solving. So I've heard this earlier, music to my ears. I tell the students when I teach 302, I don't care if you can code Python at the end. I mean, at this point, you can just use ChatGPT. What I care more about is, can you solve a problem? Do you understand how do I get to a solution from a problem that I'm trying to solve? The coding, that's just a skill. You can pick it up in a separate way. But if you can't think about how do I solve this problem, that's going to throw you for a loop, no pun intended. So database systems, right? You need to be able to store the data that you're collecting as part of the business. So we run through some SQL and data modeling. And then also systems analysis and design. So how to gather requirements, how to work with a client, how to design a system that you're going to end up building. So once they do all of this, they get to this course. They're going to work with a, quote, real client. We'll talk about that in a minute. And we want them to be able to analyze business processes, build a prototype, come up with system documentation, both from a functional perspective and a user perspective as well. So they're really, in this course, going from end to end, from problem statement all the way to solution. In the 403 course, they're learning some of this stuff, and they will carry over some of it to the 407 class. So we do require teams in this class. Some of the teams start from their team in 403. So in the 403 class, they form a team, and if they would like to, they're welcome to use the same team in 407. In my teaching of 407, not a single team decided to go through to in 407. Any thoughts on why? Why do you think they didn't choose to do that? That's exactly the reason, right? They were not happy with their team. So we either let them continue, or if they didn't, then I split them up, and then I chose how to reallocate them. And I told them, in industry, you don't get to choose your teammates, just like you don't get to choose your colleagues. So I decided how they would go. And what I did is I split them up by major. So for example, I did not have a team of all accounting majors. That would probably cause some issues because some might be more technical than others. And so that would be a problem. What I also made sure that I did is I tried to include some diversity. There were no teams of all male members. There were no teams of all Americans. And so I tried to, again, switch it up a little bit to help give them that real industry experience that you will not get exactly what you would like. So in this course, it's also very different. In many experiential learning things that I've heard before, it's the faculty member who finds the projects. That's not very real world, right? Real world would be you need a sales team of some kind who's going to go find the clients. Well, in this case, they are the sales team. So they have to go convince a client to work with them and to help them with this project. I don't do that. I tell them that's your responsibility. You are acting as a consultant. So this semester, we've gotten a lot of interesting projects. Most of them are local Maryland, so University of Maryland. They're local Maryland businesses. One of them actually convinced KPMG to help them do a little bit of a university recruiting system. And we even got an Arby's franchise, which I thought was very interesting as well. So how long does? So UMD don't do anything. It's all between the students and the client. So hopefully they've done it in 403. So when they get to 407, they're ready. I did have one team in their 407. The project was not up to what it needed to be. And so it took them about 2.5 weeks to find a new client. They were very behind very quickly. And then they realized, oh no, we would like to graduate. We need to speed this up a little bit. And so it was on them. So at that point, their project timeline had to be shortened. The work isn't shortened because you don't get to choose what you finish. That's what they did. So they worked harder. So why real clients? We already know about experiential learning. We know that we want them to be able to emulate what they've done in school. If they've never done anything that is like real world, then that's going to be a problem for them. They're not going to be as prepared as, say, other students. So that's the first main reason. The other important reason is we just recently, in the past year or so, have gotten a new university-wide strategic goals, and then also our school goals as well, and shock, experiential learning, and we want to catalyze entrepreneurship locally. So there's a big push to help the local economy of Maryland as well. And so for us, if our students are finding local businesses, local entrepreneurs, that's going to be a great way to help jumpstart those businesses as well. So what are the deliverables in this class? So again, it's a phased approach. So they're going to start with a statement of work. So in that statement of work, they're going to come up with the client, what is the problem they're trying to solve? What is the scope of what it is they're going to do? What's included in the scope? What is excluded from the scope? So it's their job to figure out exactly what it is that they're going to do. From that, they are required to meet the scope. So in other words, in order to pass the course, you must meet all aspects of the SOW. And I look at all the SOWs just to make sure there's parity. So if there's one team that is going really crazy, then I will tell them to scale it back to make sure that it is a project that can be done in the time of a semester. Other teams have decided we're going to do the bare minimum, and they were told that's not going to work. You need to add more to your scope as well. Once the statement of work is done, you're going to notice all of these say plus industry presentation. We have really solid industry support at UMD, so they make a presentation at the end of each phase. Representatives this semester from KPMG and Deloitte came, judged them, gave them feedback, and then we awarded a phase winner at the end of each phase. So not only are they getting opportunity to get, quote, real industry feedback, since I'm faculty, they don't think I have any industry feedback. So they get that. And then on top of that, it gives them networking opportunities. So for those students who are panicking, thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have a job, it's now giving them a chance to talk to industry as well. So we're trying to prep them for those kinds of engagements too. So once they finish their statement of work, then they go on to the system design. So that's going to include things like a data diagram, input and output flows, a logical design, data flows, everything that's going to essentially say, what is it that we need to build this system? I missed one step, and this is the most important step. Phase one, they're also going to give me a timeline. So in other words, I want to know from a project management perspective, what is it that they're going to do and when. That helps me, and it helps them track, are they on track to actually finish the semester? Because the worst case scenario would be, you get to the end of the semester and they don't finish the project. That would be problematic. So in phase two, they do those system design artifacts. They also update everything that was needed from their phase one, because imagine that whatever you did in phase one, it's not going to automatically be perfect, and you're going to make no changes. So they will update all of their stuff from phase one and give an updated timeline as well. And then our industry comes back and they judge again. So again, KPMG and Deloitte comes back for a second time, judge them again, give them more feedback that they can then go ahead and implement. Then we get to the fun part, that's phase three. Now we go build. So they will go build a functional prototype in various technologies that I'll talk about in a minute. And again, another presentation. And so at the end, they are now showing from the start, this is what we said we were going to do. Phase three just ended a couple of days ago, this week. They presented, this is what we have built for the customer. So essentially, it's going from start all the way to the end. As you can imagine with any term-long project, it is highly likely that students will say, that's fine, we'll just wait until the last week and we'll just build it in a week. I already know, and I'm sure you guys would know, there's no way that would happen. Even if they coded for 24 hours a day, it's just not going to happen. So I included 3 benchmarks during that phase to make sure they were really making progress on it. And then the last phase is documentation. So again, if this were a real client engagement, after you built the system, you would hand over documentation that says, this is the system that we actually built for you, and here is a user manual so that you understand how to use the system that we built for you. So we're making sure that they're including both technical and non-technical artifacts as a result. So all the phases are graded, and then also to help them stay on track, I make them do weekly progress reports as well. This is a way for me to make sure that all team members are participating, that they're providing adequate quality and quantity of work. So this is what the course schedule looks like. So we cover a lot of technologies very quickly. Our students don't know most of these technologies. So I also use this course to teach them a growth mindset. I don't know about you, but half of the stuff I learned in college is either obsolete or I don't remember it anymore. So a lot of this stuff, I go very surface level, giving them the basics. It's up to them to learn more about it. So remember what I said before, they only have learned Python, databases, and some systems analysis and design. They have not learned HTML, CSS, Bootstrap. So I give them a very basic lecture and then send them on their way. It's up to them to learn it and figure it out. Obviously, we'll give them support if they need it, but the majority of the coding will come from them. Then the technology that we're using, we wanted to stick with Python because that's what they already know. Other sections of this course teach using PHP. I really wanted to stick with Python. And so I've chose the Flask framework just because it's a fairly simple framework to use. And so we go through a various number of different topics that we cover. Not all teams do everything. So for example, a team that's helping a local clothing store might need e-commerce, and they may do a lot of e-commerce, but they may skip on the data visualization. A different team, the Arby's franchise, they did a really nice project. They did invoice processing. And so they took a bunch of client invoices and they automated the process. So it ended up saving the client a lot of time because now it's no longer a manual process. So this class meets either once a week or twice a week. So for the classes that meet once a week, it's about 2 hours and 40 minutes or so. And then for the classes that meet twice a week, it's half that time. And so the schedule can be broken out in either way. This is what a typical module looks like. So every module always has a description. What do I want you to get by the end of the module? And then I give them some notes on kind of what we're going to cover. Then I give them kind of a practice skill activity just to make sure they have the general idea as to how to do whatever that skill is. And then I give them some extra resources so that I'm not completely throwing them in the pool, but I'm giving them some ways that they can see where is it that I can learn more at that point. After that, then they're on their own. So in a given week, lecture, skill check, and then with the time left over, I let them work in groups in their project group if they want to meet or work on their project or do whatever it is that they need to do at that point. So here's just a sample student project. This is the one where this was for the IT consulting firm. So they built a system that would track employees and hours worked against there. I'm only going to show you just a couple of screens that's there. So this is just the login screen. This is the screen that's going to help them create a project. So again, there's some HTML, some CSS. This team went a little bit crazier. They said, you know, we want to learn JavaScript. So they added in some JavaScript as well. So it enables them to do some data validation, make sure they're entering in correct information. And then they ended up getting to some of the functionality. So here in this case, they are assigning staff members to projects for the purposes of knowing who worked and what number of hours did they work. So in this specific project, they have customer, project manager, and then employee. So they have different user roles, and each role logs in, and they see a different set of functionality. And then they also did a dashboard as well. So they incorporated some Python libraries to create data visualization, a dashboard. This is just one of them. There are a couple of others that are there. But it's teaching them not only the analytics part, but how do we communicate all of our analytics to technical and non-technical people. I find with a lot of stuff that we do, it sounds great, but if the business doesn't understand what we're doing or the impact of it, they're gonna be like, that looks great, now what? One of my favorite things that a client said to me, she said, I don't care what you do as long as I understand it and it looks pretty. So I just thought that was very interesting from her. So what are some of the typical challenges in this kind of course? As you can imagine, technical skills are definitely a challenge. There are students, I know this is being recorded, so I'll just say politely, their technical skills are not where they need to be. And there are others who could probably teach parts of the course. And so that ends up being a little bit of a challenge. And then as you can imagine, team dynamics are definitely a challenge as well. But for those situations, I always push back on the students saying, what do you think you should do? And I make them talk to each other and I say, listen, if you are offended enough to come to me, you are adult enough to talk to each other. You're about to go into industry, you are ready to talk to each other. And I force them, and they begrudgingly say, all right, and they do it. And that's their job at that point. For the tech skills issue, what I've typically done is I've said, listen, you're working in a team, everybody's gonna have different strengths and weaknesses, and so you have to leverage each other to help each other out where there are some deficiencies as well. That was faster than I thought it would be. What questions do you have? Yeah.
When I saw what you do on the back end, it's impressive on the front end. Why don't you teach them JavaScript? I think that'd be a better way. I saw one team study.
What should we cut? I would love to teach them JavaScript. It would be amazing.
If you wanted to develop systems, you need a front end.
No, this is a front end.
Yeah, but these guys did in JavaScript.
No, but they did one small piece in JavaScript. All of this is HTML, CSS. What's? No. I I respectfully disagree. No. HTML and CSS, because they're using the Bootstrap framework, so that makes it a little bit easier on them, and harder, because Bootstrap, sometimes you just, just want to do not nice things to it. Yeah.
What do you do to support them in terms of resources and on both the project management and what project management approach do you take and other techniques, lean techniques, et cetera? And what do you do on the teaming, helping them with communications, helping them with leadership,
Yep.
et cetera? What support? What process?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So on the project management side, I put a couple of rail guards in place. The first is the project timeline. So the project timeline has to clearly articulate all tasks that need to be done, who's doing them, when are they due. So they take their first cut at it in phase 1. They get a lot of feedback, because more often than not, their project timeline basically just relists the phases, which that's not a timeline, I'm just relisting the phases. So they get that feedback, they fix it, and in phase 2, usually it's closer to what it needs to be at that point. And then as they start doing the project, they start having trouble. And then when they come in and to me and they say, well, we're having trouble, my first question to them is, show me the timeline. Show me, where did you agree as a team that you were going to do this by this time? And they said, well, we didn't do that. When I said, well, okay, but now you're seeing this is the impact of that. So in a way, I let them fail, but I don't let them go over the cliff. I am the primary resource. So in a section, there's between 30 and 40. And so in any given section, there's between 6 to 8 groups. Yeah, so it's a lot of people. So we have the timeline. I also have the weekly report, so I read their weekly report every week. And if I don't see anything that's concerning, I just let them go. If I see something that's a little concerning but not over the cliff, I will let them go, because I want them to fail so they can succeed. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, John.
Oh, so just one last thing. Welcome to contact me, because I like freebies. On the website that I have there, I also have the syllabus that I have here, which I did not give because I wanted you to go to my website.